Where to start? uh, where would I like to start? I would like to start with my latest memory of you. Okay. Which is Uma, as you can see, we were just talking, Lakshmi and me. We've reached this age, many of us in this room who've been part of the women's movement, etc. We've reached this age where people look to us, and younger ones look to us and say, oh, we want to be like you when we grow up, okay? And because we've reached, that senior kind of status we've acquired. But yesterday when I was speaking to Uma, she said, something like, oh, you're a smart young woman, you'll figure it out.
It's true.
So, but I just want to say, Uma, looking at your zest and your energy and your intensity, your passion, I don't know, everything. I definitely want to be like you when I grow up. Okay? Just two images. Just a couple of weeks ago, there were some of us, including Mamta and all of us, were in Calcutta, in Swayam, where Uma and me were on a panel on the women's movement. We were trying to understand what has happened to the women's movement from the 70s to the current thing. So, and at that conference, the one who danced in the most wildest and with such abandon was, guess who?
Because they were being, were being badmashes and dancing away. Yeah.
She was even dancing to Kala Chashma. I must tell you. She had this Kala Chashma on and she was dancing to her. And yesterday when I was talking to her, again when we were saying, what should we talk about? What she was talking, I can't wrap my head around you, Uma. Because she was saying that, she was asking me, where can you find a river? She wanted to go to a river, okay? And why? Why did she want to go to the nearest river? Because she was scouting for locations. For whatever reason. I don't know.
No.
I don't know for what reason you're scouting locations. But she's looking for a river, to just go and visit, and hats off to you, seriously. Seriously. And thank you so much for continuing to be this relentless, I don't know, what do we call her? This relentless, oh wow, okay, yes, capricious crusader who has not lost. You might say that, you were born in the time of hope and you feel that you're going in the time of despair. But as long as we have you and people like you around, Uma, we are not going to despair. That's for sure.
Okay.
That's for sure.
Great.
Okay,
good.
Okay, so now let me come back to the film, okay, since that's what I'm supposed to lead you in.
In
that direction of, with those things. So just to start off with this, I've been, I also watched the last film of yours. In fact, we had a conversation on that also, thanks to Vikalp, who keeps, as Sunanda said, pulling me. Thank you so much, because it forces me also to look and watch and engage with all of this. So you had made Ye Lo Bayan Hamara, which was, in a way, it preceded this film. Uma has become like this serial, maker. She's like the serial maker. So she had made this film, I don't know, all of you must see that also, which was Ye Lo Bayan Hamara, which was about the women in the left, it was largely around women who had been imprisoned and jailed, for their convictions and their beliefs and their participation in the democratic movements in the 70s, from the 60s to the 70s. So it was very, very fascinating to listen to their, reminiscing about, their participation in the movement and how they, confronted not only the state, but also the patriarchy within their own movements, within their own homes. So it was very, very fascinating, very, very layered. So this is like a, sequel, to that. You've been now involved with, a range of movements. You're an academic, you write. So what is this, what is it that drives you through all this, through all these decades, You have shifted from, academia to, you've moved between academia to activism to filmmaking. So what is it that drives you and why is it that you keep drawing? Because as I understand, most of your films are drawing from the women's movement, you know. So what is it that drives you, that has made you what you are because of the movement that you've been associated with? And what is it that keeps driving you, that you keep coming back to the movement to mine it, you know, for more and more, whatever it is that you're trying to put together and leave behind for the world?
You know, if you're associated with this, with movements and the issues that it throws up, and in my time, I think most dramatically it was the emergency that pushed me into becoming a democratic rights activist. Because one came into even things like the democratic rights organizations were created just after 77, you know, when the emergency was lifted and we opened up and so on. And you people have been here in your history and Bangalore's history is that somebody who was active as a political figure, but also as an actress and whatever, is Snehata Reddy. She lived here and she died as a consequence of the incarceration that she was subjected to. So, so she, you know, the movement threw up lots of. Now the others have gone into those who were in jail at the same time. People like Arun Jaitley and, you know, even L.K. Advani was in jail at that time. They've made careers of themselves thereafter. But we have someone who died as a consequence of that incarceration. So I think that incarceration, experience of incarceration, a colleague of mine was a good friend of the Patabi family. And so she brought me a copy of prison diaries that had been, which Anantamurthy had written an introduction to. So I stored it away many years ago. So in some ways, I think the emergency, post-emergency, and so on, made me an archivist. So I began to stow away papers. I was putting away. I mean, that's my relationship to history anyway. You don't throw away a paper that is of any significance in your own life. So all of that was happening. And when I at some point of time, and I've been a great film watcher all my life. So I was watching films since I was 4 years old. So I'm really someone I can actually sit and have a conversation on films that were made 50s, 60s, whatever it is. So I've been a film. And when the documentary film movement started, I was actually a viewer of that. So Anand Patwardhan's Prisoners of Conscience was screened in Miranda House because I got it to screen. So in a sense, I've had a relationship with documentary cinema also, apart from the fact that I've actually been a film watcher all my life. So in some ways, that thing stayed. Now, I don't think at any point of time I thought I would turn into a filmmaker. But as part of one's relationship to history, I came across an extremely unusual archive, which I stumbled upon because the granddaughter of this person, whose archive it was, had just stored away bits of paper in a trunk. And they were random pieces. They would look as though they were random pieces, but they were not random pieces. They were actually associated with her life. Things that she'd read, notes that she'd made. And there was a thin diary there also. And they'd all been kept in a trunk, and an old, trunk. When the granddaughter was talking to me about it, at some point I said, is the trunk still there? And are the holdings still there? And she said, yes, they are. And I said, we should make a film about it. I could immediately visualize the trunk and its extraordinary holdings. And it seemed to me that there was a archival, because the archive is so, you can't write, and the other part of it is that you actually cannot write women's histories because we don't have an archive. Our lives are not documented. Of course, ordinary human beings, all men, all working class men, all, the people do not figure in an archive. It's ultimately the political figures who figure in an archive. So how do you write the histories of people who have left nothing behind? So in that context, this trunk with the stuff was quite extraordinary. And so I said, we should make a film. And this is Maithili Shivaraman, who's an activist herself. She looked confused. She thought she's trying to write a book, and here's this woman saying, let's make a film. She thought I was a nutcase. And she, dropped it. But I proceeded, and the visual of that thing had stayed. And I offered it to many young women, and I said, let's make a film on this, or you make a film. And they all said, yeah, great idea and all. And they dropped. No, of course, no one was going in that direction. And then one fine day, I said to myself, okay, I'll make the film. And it was just like that. And then I pitched 2009. I'd taken early retirement in order to be both in the street and in the library. And so I ended up and then I pitched for the film by going to the ministry. Somebody told me that the Ministry of External Affairs has a grant to make films. So I went along and I tried to pitch it to them. And they said, what use is this to us? Like this woman's life. And I was so furious, I jumped. I, sort of reacted like viciously, like a viper. And I said, what do you think? You think the national movement was made up of the Nehrus and the Gandhis? It was made up of ordinary men and women, So he said, and you backed off and I got the money. So I made that film and whatever. And then it went on, the films. But it is part of my relationship to women's history. Because how do you actually document women's history in the absence of that kind of archive? So.
Yeah, no, you're very right there, because there are certain histories that really get written out and don't get recorded, they remain invisible. So I think all your films in that sense are, kind of recording, archiving, putting it out there. And watching this film was like, it was really like a hair-raising experience, for me, because, we've all been many of us sitting in this room, have been through many of these moments, whether it was, of course, the famous Calicut conference or the, protests against dowry rates or, from then to, Bilkis Banu, to the CAA and NRC, everything. We've all kind of, been part of these moments. But, I mean, this was just a kind of, as a filmmaker, I just want to ask you, since you're a filmmaker and an archivist, somewhere it's a kind of cross. Because this film, it makes a lot of sense to many of us sitting in this room, because we've all been. It's like a what do you call it? A home film.
Yeah.
It's like a home film, where we all see each other. Oh, you look so cute and so lovely, when you were younger. We see everybody in their younger avatars. We see Celine, we see, Chayanika, we see Abha, we see so many people, who are kind of. So it's like a home cinema, with the grainy VHS and, with it really has that kind of a feel. But if it is something, because I think it's an extraordinary kind of, montage. It's a mosaic, of memories. It's really a mosaic of memories and very, very critical and crucial, moments in the movement, and also gives you a, huge, the span of it, not only in terms of time, but also in terms of issues, that the movements, because I would not say it's only women's movement, there are multiple movements, that have fed into this one movement. So it is a mosaic of all of this. But don't you think that you, as a, historian or a narrator, could have been a little more present in the film to give it a bit of a context and an outsider kind of a thing, to link it all together? We all get the connections, but I don't know, because I loved watching it. But I'm just saying that if this is going to be something that, that is going to be left, for the coming generations, it would have, I don't know, would you think, that
Well,
could have made it in a way?
one sense, I may not be visible in the film, but the entire arc...
You're there like Alfred Hitchcock, you come in one bit.
Well, I come in one bit, but that's incidental. It was I was a subject expert at a time when,
Sati,
whatever that's... No, but the thing is that, see, the arc of the film, if you notice, is one that goes from... Not every single movement could be represented, a phase of the movement, but there is an arc, and the arc is actually me And my watching both the women's movement and the democratic movements coalescing together and whatever. So the bit on Kashmir, for instance, or the bit on Soni Sori, these are all things that one has been involved with in some capacity, because either as a fact finder or in some capacity. And then I've made films which precede, like for instance, the Kashmir film is preceded, Kashmir bit is preceded by a film that I made on friendship, disrupted friendship in some ways, because a Kashmiri woman and Seba Hussain were good friends of each other. I was quite obsessed with, I'd started getting obsessed with the prison, because the prison was happening all around us. You know, people were being put into prison. So, when the 370 was the what's it called, the Dhakka of 370 happened, we were all devastated. And I didn't know what was there. And then it suddenly occurred to me that there is a story in this friendship which was disrupted because Anjum Zamrood went to jail for 5 years on some case. She was already friends with Sehba before that. Sehba did not, but during that 5 years when she was in jail in Delhi, Sehba did not go and see her. She chickened out. She felt fearful. So that was left, and it seemed to me there was a metaphor over there between India and Kashmir in the way in which we related to each other. So I suddenly, it was part of my anguish that I made up that film, you know. So that's one of the films that features over here also. So in a sense, the relationship to, and the prison became, as things got worse and worse, the prison became claustrophobic as a space, which was taking away people, and there was, you were left with no explanation, and then there was this thing, Tariq pe Tariq kind of thing happening. And as you all know, you were all involved in the Gulfishan, the mobilization for Gulfishan. It was, you were stuck in a space where you could do nothing. We are all in a space where we are watching what's happening, and we are unable to change the course to affect the system. So it's a very frustrating, it's a very, it's a bad moment for us. In a sense, the making of the film allows you to bring that in also. So, you know, so the film doesn't have only what you normally classically regard as the women's movement, but the women's movements across the country. And so you draw that in. So the arc is that arc is where I am, because that's how I see things happening.
I have many more questions, but I don't know. I think maybe the audience also has some.
Sure.
So Sunanda, where are you? Yeah. So shall we open it out? I've got lots of questions. But
Okay.
yeah. Yes, yeah. Should we give the mic? Oh, mic. Okay.
She's taking it out. Sunanda's taking it.
Thank you so much for such a lovely archive of documentation of movements. So in some sense, it felt like you were also honoring the filmmakers who have captured these movements. And I think that was really, really lovely. Speaking of archives and films and kind of pieces of work that hold the memories of the things that we fought for, and if this had to fit into that fabric of memories, what would you kind of give as an advice to a viewer who may think that this is the complete story of the movements that have come before us? How would you expect one to watch it, knowing that there are a lot of things in between and after and outside of the margins, you know? So what would you have to say for that?
Should we take a couple of questions and then you answer them together, Uma? Would you like that? Prefer that?
Well, yeah, if you
Because
like.
there were two
Couple.
other hands up. So.
All right.
Hello, hi. I wanted to ask how important is it for women to show up in this protest and show strength in their numbers? And in these times, how important is it to assert your identity when there's like this massive uh, s- opposite ideology is taking strength? Thank you.
Hi, thank you for the wonderful documentary. And I mean, this is really a, it actually took me back to my master's class. I was a student of gender studies. So I have a question regarding the IAWS. So when we learned about, the organization, how it formed and the conferences, and what we have seen now, like, do you think, what is the future of the organization? I'm asking because I don't see much, protest or, their active involvement in, the recent issues in national level. So, I mean, I'm just curious to know your take on that.
Okay. I've also been a member. I am a member of the IAWS.
Even I am a member of
and it's an uneven relationship, if I may say so.
And one second, I'm happy to heard that this time the conference is happening in Bangalore.
And we are hoping that it can happen without too much trouble.
Hope so.
No. So, see, one of the constraints, I'll take it in reverse, although maybe I shouldn't. This is a slightly more, what is that first, just remind me of that first question.
First question was regarding what is missed.
Yeah. Actually, you see, I've tried to be as comprehensive as possible in the sense that the availability of films, given what it is, around the issues that the movement has put out, whether it's the violence against women. The early campaigns have been documented fairly closely to the sequence of what happened. In its later phases, and even when it returns to it, towards the end, you go back to the CAA and whatever. Again, it's a movement that that returns us, and it preceded. It's actually in the new time, but it precedes the COVID, and it's a high moment. The way the CAA protests were not only held in Shaheen Bagh, but they were duplicated across the country because there were smaller Shaheen Baghs that were happening across the country. So it was a great moment, and you were reclaiming the constitution, which is also a response to the times, which is to say what we have, and the most important thing that we have is actually the constitution, and we'll claim our rights from it. We don't want to, and the constitution technically would not make a distinction between Hindus and Muslims and so on. And I want to, that little incident, there's Bilkis Banu in the film, okay? No, sorry, not Bilkis Banu. There's Bilkis Banu, but there's also Bilkis Dadi. I don't know if you noticed her, but she's in that film and she says, "Aamne samne aa jao, tum bhi nahi hatte, hum bhi nahi hatte." It's a fantastic statement. You come unarmed, I'll also be unarmed, and let's face each other. The government never responded to the invitation that they should dialogue, at the end of the day. Now, and this is where the larger arc will come in. So I went to the demonstration, and I was asked to speak. Bilkis Dadi was sitting below. She was, participating very creatively in every sense of the term. So we got to conversation. I was waiting to be asked to come onto the podium. And she said to me, and it's most moving account, she says, "I can count my ancestors for 7 generations before me, but I don't have a single piece of paper." And then I said to her, spontaneously, I said, "I also don't have a single piece of paper because I don't have a birth certificate. I was born in 1941. There were no birth certificates at that time, So technically, I have no certificate of birth, technically, to claim the citizenship. But even as I said it, I knew it won't matter to me, it will matter to her because I'm born Hindu. So I will not be asked that question. So in a sense, the capturing of the crisis, political crisis of our times, is articulated in just that one episode. And how do you respond to it, So, but in these times also, there is this whole challenge, and people have lost their FCRAs, and they can't do their work, they can't do the work that they used to do, because now you'll have to be acceptable to whatever it is. So in a sense, it's a challenging moment, and I think the IAWS is stuck between a rock and a hard place, and you can also see that it's a difficult one. I mean, I was supposed to go and deliver the Neera Desai Memorial Lecture in Bombay in the SNDT University. SNDT University has been created for women and for empowering women, okay? But somebody got hysterical up there because I had written on Brahmanical patriarchy, and it's suddenly become political, okay? So they get in touch with the Vice Chancellor and they say, what's going on in your university? And the invitation is withdrawn. I mean, that is it, it's cancelled. So then we have our feminists. We must say, feminists are doing pretty well because they have created an alliance in Maharashtra of all feminist groups. And there's a loose alliance of these feminists. They get together and they're doing whatever it is. So they hosted the film and they hosted the lecture. And I was not, the Neera Desai Memorial Lecture happened. And it happened in circumstances like this, non-funded because everybody's pooling in. So they create the occasion for it. And I am not going to talk about, I was not going to speak about, I was going to talk about precisely what is happening to courses, how women's studies has come into the courses, what kind of work academics have done to open up the questions of gender, and the manner in which we've, but, one is forced to then deflect. And Bombay has been fantastic. So cancelled out lectures are hosted by an alternative group which is doing all the cancelled out lectures. So Nasruddin Shah is called to speak on Urdu, as innocuous as Urdu. On the previous evening, it's withdrawn. The invitation is withdrawn. So then this group is putting on cancelled out lectures. So we held the lecture anyway. Okay, cock a snook at them then. You got to come back in some way. You can't give up.
Yeah, I think the other question was about
Yeah.
participation in protests. Like how do we come out to, why is it important to show up in this?
It is. But this is the kind of thing, wherever the spaces are, it is important to show up. The protests are happening. And in Karnataka, for instance, protests are happening. The Dharmasthala movement is happening over here. So it's not as if to say the protest has gone into some, whatever, limbo. When there's an issue, people will mobilize and people will then protest. So it may not look as though we are out in the street. I mean, there's a series of montages in the end where you see what's it called? The wrestler strike is there, if you noticed it, Now, that's an extraordinary moment. The wrestlers are being pulled on the ground. That's the day when the new parliament is being opened. And it's flashed across the world. That visual goes across the world. So at the end of the day, things are happening. It's not that they are not happening. We aren't able to come out of, I mean, you have to sort of maneuver and get yourself in some other form in which you have to also speak up and do what you have to do, I think. Does that kind of answer
I think
the
there was the first question was about, which Sunanda reminded, was about the invisible, like while a lot has been covered as an archivist, you've kind of archived, but what of those silenced moments? What would you give as an advice to how we read, films like this, which might have some moments which have not.
One tried to be as the arc that I tried to use was not conventional. It was not. You might not see the Association for the Disappeared Persons Association in Kashmir as a women's movement, but it is, because the women are asking questions about disappeared persons and saying, where are our disappeared brothers and fathers and sisters and sons? And it's a very critical question that Parveena often asks in public sphere, public spaces. She says, what happened? All that we're asking for is accountability. Where are our sons? Where are our sons or brothers or whatever? Did the sky eat them up? Did the earth swallow them? Tell us where they are. We have a right to know. So that too is a women's movement. You may not see it as conventionally as a women's movement, but it is the voice of women asking political questions of the state, at the end of the day. So I think that now in this, I didn't want to get into the mess of doing 2.5-hour film because Yellow Bayan Hamare of mine sank. It was too long to screen at most places. Most places didn't screen it. So I was damned if I was going to, and I was told this by film festival wallas and so on, that if we select that, somebody liked that film very much, one of the organizers. But he said that if we took that one film, we would have to give up on three other smaller films, So I sank in that. And that film has not really screened as much as it should, and so on. So there's this challenge of how far you can go, what you can say, and you have to seize the moment and do whatever you can. But the manner in which we tried to close the film is to say it doesn't go away. And in Bilkis Banu's case, finally they had to, of course they appealed to the courts also, and they did the protest, but then those fellows went back to jail. So in a sense, the movement is there. Movements are there. We may not see them so often, and the large protests on the streets are what the institutions, state seems to be fearful of.
Okay, I think there was Maya there and some other hand.
Uma, some of us have known you for very long and in so many different capacities. And then when one watches, some of us have watched your other films as well. You're not just chronicling something, you are an active participant in there, not for 1 year, 2 years, but for a whole span. I'm curious to know two things. You as in so many different hats that you wear, and also in your person, you change. You change vis-a-vis, it's up to you how you want to respond, whether it's movement, whether it is you as filmmaker, whether it is you as a history teacher, and we were students. And all of those persons that come together in you, I want to get a glimpse at how has Uma changed? And how does Uma now look at her films and think, yes, I've made my own departures. I'm not that woman who made that film. I'm not just asking about your attitude to some aspect of the women's movement might have changed. Of course, that's part of it. But I'm greedy to know more about what does it mean to have spanned this long span in so many different capacities, and how does that woman look back at her own works and her own navigations and the things that she put out?
Yeah, I'll take it. I'm not going to take 2-3 questions at the time because it sinks. See, in a sense, a fundamental. I don't know why we are here. I'm still mystified about why we are born, and what is our destiny. Why are we born? And all we can say is that we are born, and then it'll end at some point. Some have a shorter life, some have a longer life. Okay, but at the end will come. And I'm very mindful of Buddhism, the Buddha and his quest in some sense of the term. Suffering is also something that I have internalized so in some ways, actually, how do you respond to your times? So you do democratic rights work. I've done lots of fact-finding. Many of these, Kashmir, all of these places, one has gone as fact-finder to find out the kinds of things that have happened in those places and so on. Parveena Hangar is someone I met, she was in the middle of her search for her son, but nothing came of it, and she's never got to know what has happened. So your persona, I'm a historian. in a fundamental way, fact-finding is part of my own sense of relationship with my times and with my history. I mean, I can't live the way in which I blot out. I'll do the work in the official archive, but history is not happening outside. History is not happening around me. So in a sense, one gets, just like your craft, Maya, and the issues that you pick up are very critical of the time. You are placed in a certain kind of situation or a certain moment in history, and you respond to it by creating what you do very effectively, which is to create a play, create a way in which you draw attention to that whatever moment. So I think in some ways my relationship to my times is being determined by force, by my own sense of self and sense of history. But it's also the fact that you don't live in isolation. You actually live in your times. And if you're in one movement, it actually spills over to other movements also. I mean, I can't believe that I can be only in the women's movement and I will not respond to the democratic rights movement. No, at the end of the day, I will. There will be a way in which I will be drawn into that too. So I think that's how it's happened. Somewhat, it's part of my own sense of, part of my own relationship to my times, that I do it. So even as I say I'm despairing and I will die in despair, there's part of me which I think doesn't want to give up on the recording of it at least. If not, I can't do anything to change the circumstances, but I will not give up on recording it. And I'll do it in the way that I can at that moment. So this was a tukka, because I haven't got, I'm Pension Pictures, and I am called Pension Pictures because I don't get funding anymore. Funding ceased. Fortunately, I belong to a time when I get to a time of teaching where we did have pension and proper pension, okay? Which gets, by the way, interestingly, Maya, you'll be pleased to note that when you turn a certain age, your pension goes up. So I'll be 85 in a couple of months. The pension will go up a little, okay? Because I'm still alive. And they're willing to, they're wanting to give it to me. So it's a very crazy world. But so I've made all my present films based on my own money. And I created it, I joked and I said, "Mereko paise nahi milega, chalo, I'll be a company by myself, and it'll be called Pension, and I'll be Pension Pictures." And that's how Pension Pictures came into being. But this time, I got a lottery because somebody gave me money to make a film on the women's movement, okay? Now, I was damned if I was going to go around and talk to half a dozen or 20 or 25 women and say, what happened, what were you involved with, and so on. I said, I'm not going to do talking heads. And then because I'm so invested in archiving, this is the one that came to me. I mean, it was like a bulb. I'll make the film based on films that have already been made on the women's movement. And so then I'll get the arc of the movement through that. And all I've done is to craft it in a certain kind of way so that it may not represent every single movement that happened, but the arc is there. And so one is able to look at it and provide it. That's how I did it. I don't know if it satisfies you, Maya. You're difficult to satisfy. A part of me has changed and a part of me hasn't changed, I think. Maya, a part of me has changed, but a part of me hasn't changed, I think. And that's what is the mainspring, It's my relationship to you people as students, for instance. You doing theater, you doing whatever it is. Why am I engaged in your theater, for instance? It's like I can't switch off my relationships with people and the meaningful things that they are doing. So, it stays. You find ways of keeping one's contacts and relationships alive, and the movements come in as a consequence of that?
I think that was a fantastic archived process. And a lot of it resonated with us, with me specifically, seeing the documented forms of all the movement that we went through. And also, in one way, my spine kind of arched when I saw the film, and then it slumped again, thinking of today. So it's just that a lot of resonation happens with all of us who were part of those years.
Yeah.
You know, so it's very important to have that in our memory and very important to carry it forward. But my question still remains basically that we were in the period where we saw hope and a feminist movement, or if you call it an autonomous movement, growing. But yet, it grew in very many directions.
Yeah.
There was no one kind of direction.
Yeah.
There was also the democratic movements. There was also the only purely autonomous movements, for which there were a lot of debates and a lot of clashes and conflicts.
Correct.
My question is, like, do you see a feminist movement today? And the other issue is that if you actually see the trajectory in which the youth have been growing, in which the women of today and the whole generation, whole generational change, transformation that is taking place, and then you see the influx of hate, and you see the influx of, communalism, fascism. When it was there at that period, at that time I felt the feminist movement did not deal with it well, and that is why we brought out a paper at that time saying the fascists are the women and we have the movement. And that has deepened today. So how would you see, I'm not talking of it as only a feminist movement, as a social movement, how would you see as a social movement with a lot of women involved and a lot of men involved emerging today?
If I can just add
Yeah,
to that, I'm just deepening that question, tweaking it a little to say, do you see, like Geeta also said it, do you see a movement, relevance of movement today, and relevance of any feminist politics of any kind? Do you see the relevance of it in today's context, given the nature of the state, the nature of, patriarchy, everything?
See, if you look at it from the agenda of the women's movement is not done. We're certainly not living in a violence-free society. And I'm not talking about, the women's movement, of course, even recently, this whole drama that's taking place about Trisha Sharma and this mother-in-law who says, extraordinary response that she talks about the fact that she brought in a Brahmin girl into the household, into a Rajput household, because she thinks that Brahmin girl will now do Tulsi Puja, at the end of the day. So she's to reinvent herself as a Tulsi, although we know that Tulsi is not what she was, because we know also that an ex-feminist is telling us all the things that, that is happening in the political world. But be that as it may, it's ridiculous. The violence against women, the violence of unequal relations between men and women, and the violence of the marriage system as it exists in India, it's still there, it's staring you in the face. And you're still faced with the situation where the girl's mother is saying, no, try and adjust for a little longer. Now, we were recently at a brainstorming of the past, and it was interesting that they came up with a concept of natal violence. Now, I had never heard it framed like that. But the dowry violence is actually it's your family refusing to take you back. It's exactly what Veena Majumdar is saying. I have no sympathy for these parents who are crying at this point of time, because they have not done what they've needed. So, but the category of natal violence becomes very interesting, and everybody was using it. The disabled girls were using it. There are many types of trans people were using. Trans people were using it in a big way, because they are facing natal violence dramatically. So, in a sense, I don't see that the movement has died. The movement has gone into other places, and it's opened up other kinds, ways of questioning, interrogating, and so on. And even in the work that we are now doing, we are actually, in a sense, synthesizing much better in our understanding of what is, it's not unilateral. If you look at the Dalit question, and you look at the women's question at the end of the day, the violence has not diminished, the violence has escalated. The number of cases that have gone up, and then you learn from history also, which is say, Uncha Nicha Hoga, there is some, but the longest struggle at the end of the day, and the longest thing that we need to be ashamed of in our country, is actually the violence against, based on caste. So there's a lot of things to do, even today. And I think in that sense, we've got to find our space of being, not giving up, whatever. No, I think we have to break out of... Yeah. Yeah. But that's the attempt that you... No, fair enough. I get it. Yeah, but... Yeah, but you have to avoid that at the end of the day. There are also, there's funded groups, and then there are other ways of affiliations that have also developed. So in some ways, we have to return to that model, and you have to keep the actions going, I mean, the activities going. I mean, the violence is not, it's gone into different places, and it stayed in the same places to some extent and so on. But at the end of the day, you can't give up on hope, and you can't therefore give up on resistance. Because that world is to be brought by whom? I mean, it's not going to come by itself. They're not giving it to you as a piece of, le, kha, tere ko mil raha hai. You'll have to fight for it, damn it. And who will have to fight for it? We'll all have to fight for it. It's not going to come. The state is never going to give you, or the dominant forces are not going to give you an egalitarian, free society. They will debar you as much as they can at the end of the day. And it's happening internationally. I mean, look at the way the world has responded. The world has not responded to the incredible misery that was being inflicted on Gaza. So, we are not in silos at the end of the day. So everyone will have to fight for that world to make a world more livable from our point of view. And you can't give up on your dream of freedom and equality, I think. So.
Okay, so I guess on that note, yeah. Okay, so thank you, Uma, and thank you, Vikalp, for creating this space in which we could.
Thank you for a lovely screening, because I had full house and a good discussion.
And what I would take away, I think, on behalf of everybody, is to tell you that the title of your film, I think what you were speaking at the end of the evening, I think was precisely what is there in the title.
Yeah.
Ki wo Subah Hami se aayegi. I
We
mean,
have to
nobody
bring
else
that.
is going to give it to
Nobody
us.
else is going to give it to us.
We have to bring in the morning, and it has to come.
It has to come.
Yeah, it has to come.
Yeah.
And thank you, Madhu. Thanks, Uma. Thanks so much.
Thank you.